Hopefully everybody can hear me. If somebody will raise your hand or hit your raise hand button, that will let me know that I'm working here, and we'll get started. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that. All right. Here we go. Sales Marketing Series April. I've got some interesting topics for you today. As always, I'm open to your questions. Your questions are what really makes it work, because I love answering questions on the fly. It's actually where I'm best. So bring them on. Um, Now, I don't actually remember what I put in my slides today, but let's go ahead and get started. Yeah, the usual things. We know how to raise a hand. Use the Q&A box to ask questions. I don't always see the chat box, even though it's open. Yeah, there we go. So let's start with what's on my mind this week. Let's see. Figure out how to do all this. All right. Um, Interview for sales positions. Really, that's where I was going to go with this. Okay, yeah. All right. So, what am I looking for when I'm interviewing for a sales position? Um, I don't remember where this came up, but I found a nice set of notes, and I thought I'd share that with you. This was probably when I was visiting a client not too long ago. Um, what am I looking for? We're all going to look for something different. We all have different interviewing styles. This is not the only way to do an interview or the only way to look for people. I actually work with some clients who have extremely technical processes and evaluations for interviewing people. I'm a little bit more of a go with the gut kind of person. I subscribe to hire fast and fire fast. There's the school of thought that says hire slow, fire fast, and then there's what most of us do is forget to hire and then fire really, really, really slowly. So I like to hire fast, fire fast. So my interview process is much more about gut. I'm looking for good individuals, um, people that I can have a conversation with, where I recognize their intellect. And this is what the criteria manifests. So I'm looking for an affable person, not necessarily a smarmy person. I don't, people who feel they've got to, you've got to get over that kiss your butt moment when people want to impress you, and I got to get them past calling me Mr. Stimson. That's really high on the priority list because my dad is not interviewing them. They need to be relatable and they need to be genuine. And smarmy is the opposite of relatable and genuine. Smarmy is having an affectation. It's being disingenuously kind and charming. Let's face it, most of us are not charming in real life. So relatable, genuine. You can usually get that out of a handshake and a quick introduction. I'm looking for somebody who's engaged in a serious hobby. Um, what this tells me is that they're an expert at something. I don't really care what it is. They could build model cars, or play with trains, or you know, uh, they can stack rocks in a creek. It doesn't really matter as long as they make time for it. They can talk about it. It's very important in a sales position that you be able to communicate well, and which means you have to have stories. You have to be able to tell stories. So um, if they can tell a story, even tell a story about a hobby, you know, I can relate to a lot of things. I can relate to dogs. I can relate to carpentry. I can relate to art. Architecture, travel. Just find something that we can relate to that you can talk about. Um, they have to be a good listener. In a lot of my interviews, I actually talk quite a bit. Particularly if I get past affable, if they're relatable and genuine, I am willing to share information. I'll talk about the job. I'll talk about experiences, and I'm looking for the ability to interact. I want them to listen. I want to hear what questions they ask. For instance, if you talk about a hobby, I'm going to ask you questions about it. Uh, yeah. Sometimes are we feigning curiosity? Yeah. Some of your hobbies are pretty boring. However, we ask questions because we want to get past the boring part. And if I share my hobby with you, which would be the logical thing to do after you talk about your hobby, then I'm hoping that you're going to ask a question, and a question that shows me that you listened and that you're engaged. So Um, logically inquisitive, clever. Cleverness, while it's hard to quantify cleverness, we know clever people when we talk to them, unless, of course, you are not a clever person, in which case you would miss it. So hopefully the interviewer is a clever person. Oh, well, it's a Friday. What am I going to do? So I'm looking for inquisitive, logical, clever, and telling a story. And the important part of telling a story is a learning point. There's got to, fables are classic. Here's the story. Here's what I learned from it. If there is not a natural learning point or they don't share a learning point, ask that. That's a great interview question. So that's interesting. Tell me, what do you do when that happens? Or what do you do? What did you learn? What was the hardest thing to learn about this hobby? Who did you learn it from? Is there a person that you modeled yourself after? Get them to find out how you can get them to share more. Because that's how we're going to learn more about people. So that's my process. I don't have a whole lot of the gotcha questions. I don't have a lot of the traditional interview questions, because I find that those are answered in this sequence. So here's the process. So people want to know what the process is for interviewing, and this works with any really kind of interview. Introduction, and I'm looking for elevator pitch. If I'm asking, I'll introduce myself and I'll make it brief. I'm the person in charge of washing bottles at our organization. I've been here for 30 years. Tell me a little bit about yourself. I'm hoping that they take the clue of doing the elevator pitch. And not everybody will do that. Particularly people are nervous when they first start out in an interview, and talking about something that's familiar to them gives them a chance to relax. I'm not there to trip them up. And then after their introduction, I'll take a short moment and I'll explain a little bit about what the job is. And then maybe I'll start a line of questioning. I said, well, tell me a little bit about, you mentioned this in your job experience. Tell me a little bit more about that. That seems to relate to what we're doing. And you go through the questioning, the give and take, the sharing. You talk about the hobbies, you talk about this and that, and then you explain what the next steps are. So the next steps may be, thanks and bye, but it could be, well, hey, here's how the process works. After this interview, we'll arrange for a second interview, and we're going to do it at this time. Look for an email. My assistant will call you, whatever it might be. So that's the general process of this, and you can compress the time on this depending on what position you're interviewing for. Which interview it is. Typically, this is a first interview process. Now, here's a couple of questions I ask. Particularly if the person's not forthcoming or doesn't share anything with me that triggers a better question. So my kind of go-to questions are, tell me about your first sales job. What's the first time you had to sell something? Tell me what that was like, and find out, what did they learn, and what do you know now that you wish you had known then, which is kind of my favorite question. What do you know now that you wish you had known the first time you sold something? It's a fun thing, and they get to share a story, and they get to connect. And if they are not genuine, it's really going to be apparent in the sharing of this story. Another question I might ask is, where do you go that has great customer service? I said, because if they bring up something about customer service and their work history or experience, I'm going to ask them, so where do you, I love great customer service. Where do you go? Is there a restaurant you've been to or hotel? Tell me a story. Why did you like that? Granted, it's another story, but it also introduces some social values, which I think are always helpful in interviews. The hobby question I talked about earlier. If they go, oh, I have so many different interests. If they do that thing where they don't really latch on to a hobby, they don't show me any passion for something, or they don't feel willing to share something, or they think maybe their hobby is, doesn't reflect well for the job that they're interviewing. I asked them a question like this. I said, if I gave you a week with no other obligations and $10,000 to spend on a hobby, and it's got to be a big chunk of money, right? It's 10,000 bucks that you can spend on a hobby. What hobby would you spend it on? What would you do with it? Now, I can answer that question. I've got 10 hobbies, any one of which would love $10,000. I could talk about this all day long. Hopefully they can find one thing, and that's when you find out that, well, their hobby is actually playing music. They don't feel they're very good at it, but they'd love to buy this new guitar, or they would love to, you know, go to this teacher and spend a week with them and learn something. That's when you're going to get something really interesting. So these are now, I know what some of you are thinking, hey, these are great questions to ask a client. No, these are interview questions. You do not interview clients. You have conversations with clients and you are interviewed by clients. Now, where these questions come helpful for you in your sales role is that you need to know how to answer them. Not because you're about to get interviewed. Your boss did not just send me an email about your job status. That's not what this is about at all. But you're going to have customers interview you, and they're going to slip in questions like this. So learn how to answer these sorts of questions. All right, so some interviewing tips for everything that you ask and they answer. Share a reciprocal story. So don't ask a question that you don't have an answer to yourself. Always slip something, share a little bit, and see how they react. If you ask the $10,000 hobby question, what would you do with 10,000 bucks? Have a short answer for yourself. For instance, say, you know what, I look at personally, I look at cars on eBay all the time. There's a couple of models I kind of track. I don't have space for it. I don't have money to buy some of the cars I'd like to buy, but I'd like to look at it. But if I had 10,000 bucks that I needed to spend on a hobby, I could find a pretty cool car I would buy on eBay. Well, hopefully the interviewee is going to ask about that car. What that car be? So they're going to have a conversation, and you get to see how well they listen and engage. So, ask, what's this one? Oh yeah. Then as you're finishing up the interview, it's that I personally find the question kind of insipid, except in interview situations. What's the question I should have asked? I call these, these are kind of the gotcha questions. But in an interview, we need to pause and say, tell me what questions that you want to ask. Ask about the job, ask about the process, ask about the company. We always need to make sure that they get an opportunity to do that. In larger companies, you have a human resource department, maybe a person who can field a lot of these questions. But I want to know what they're interested in, and I may have to pitch it to someone else and say, oh well, yeah, you're gonna have to talk to Bob or Sharon or whoever it is about that question. But I think it works like this. And then, if in the course of this interview, and you should know if you do this kind of an interview, particularly with a salesperson, you should know by the end of this conversation whether they'd be a good hire. Actually, you should know in the first 10 minutes, or you're the wrong person doing the interviews, right? Ask the question. If you think they'd be a good hire, ask them this question. Say, what would you hope we would do to get you started? Pardon the typo. What would you hope that we will do for you to help you get started in your role? In other words, tell me what your first day looks like. Tell me what your first week looks like. What is it that you would anticipate we would do to help you get started? And hopefully they'll say things, well, I hope you will explain to me how the lead process works. You explain to me how you get to your pricing. How does an order get through the system? Help me better understand who your target customer, whatever it might be. This is where you find out if they actually know anything about sales. So if they've passed the affability and conversation test, is this a person that you would put in front of a customer? Now we need to find out if they're actually going to be a salesperson. And if they answer well here and it validates your belief, you can move on to another interview, talking about the next steps. Or you can say no. You can say, hey, I don't, this has been great. I've enjoyed meeting you. I don't feel you're right for this job. I'm not planning on moving you forward at this point. But if you'd like some feedback or some recommendations, I'd be happy to share some of my thoughts with you. And they said, what could I have done better? I said, I think the big challenge for you is you don't have the experience that will help you get into this new role as quickly as I need you to. I've already spoken to candidates I think that meet that criteria much better. That's an easy way to get out of the uncomfortable part of the conversation. Or you simply say, look, we're going to schedule another interview and let's get your calendar out and let's see when we can do that right now. I'd like to bring some other people into the conversation. That second interview should be all it takes to hire a qualified salesperson, by the way. So, all right, I'm going to pause here for a moment and see if you got any questions. Again, feel free to type them any time at all. And while you're thinking about it, if you've got a favorite interview question that you like to ask folks, please share it with us. We're all kind of desperate for interview questions. I get asked for interview questions all the time, and I can answer in my style, or I can get on Google and type our good interview questions for salespeople, and you'd be amazed at how much stuff comes up. A lot of it is garbage, and a lot of it was written by human resources people for all the wrong reasons. So do that carefully and be very selective about which ones you use, because we really we want to learn about the person as much as possible. And honestly, I would interview just about anybody this way in a first interview. Anyone at all, any role at all. If I was hiring a CEO, if I'm hiring somebody to work on the loading dock, I'd probably do basically the same process and ask the same types of questions. It's not just the what do you do for fun? No, ask specifically. What's your favorite hobby? Be very specific. Not what do you do for fun? Well, I like to sit on the truck, drink beer. Give them a chance to answer the question in a way that will reflect well upon them. All right, while we're pausing here and while you're thinking of some more questions before I go to the few that were sent in, I've mentioned last month that we're going to have another Jumpstart workshop. This one's going to be specifically on sales and marketing. We have set the dates, June 1st and 2nd. I have booked the hotel. This is going to happen. The invitation, however, is the formal invitations and promotion will not start until the middle of June. However, those of you who have expressed interest in advance and have reserved some slots for your team, and I do have a nice chunk of folks, you'll be getting an email in advance that gives you a chance to register, which gets you first in line for the bonuses that you will get for registration. If more of you are interested in that, please email me. I'll share with you a little bit about the event and the pricing. You tell me how many slots that you want, and I will add you to the list of folks who will get the early release. The early release will happen. I can't give you a hard date. I'm having a staff meeting this afternoon, but I'm guessing sometime in the before the 15th of June, sometime that week prior. So reserve your spots now. We are limited. I have picked a room and I've filled it up. So in order to take more people, I'm going to have to go to another hotel room. Anyway, moving on. Questions. Let me reread this. All right, I have a question here about ideation and sales process. So I believe it was the last webinar I did was about ideation and outcome-based selling, something along that lines. So the question that came from this is, where does ideation occur in the sales process you taught us? So so this is obviously from a regular client or a regular follower. The sales process I teach is qualify, position, and close. Those are the three primary steps. And we have emphasis in each of those that makes the second, the following one easier to do. So in the sales process, where does ideation happen? So let's refresh our memories on what ideation is. Ideation is the brainstorming session that you have as a team on the client opportunity to help you formulate the most effective way to proceed. So we have a couple different places that we have it. The first place we would have it is right after the qualifying phase. Once we've had a conversation with the client, we've learned a little bit about them, we can pause at that moment and do an ideation session to figure out what's the right way to move forward. It might be, do we need to do a pitch? Do we need to, play golf? Do we need to let it cook? Do we need to talk about brand? What's appropriate? And that's the whole point of having it, because the next step's not the same for everyone, right? And ideation helps us understand what the unique opportunity is with this particular situation so we can make the right choice. But there's a lot of ways you can proceed. The other place that ideation would occur is, well, it can happen during, but most likely it would happen after the positioning conversation. So the positioning conversation is where we take the original premise of the customer request. We're having an event, we're doing an installation, whatever it might be, and we sit down and we talk through it. So it might have started with an RFP, which we need to process with the client to turn it into something better. We've got to put our spin on it. And a lot of RFP processes, you don't get a chance to position, in which case we have a different technique that we follow through with. But an RFP can be a sticky note, right? It can be the conversation that you had with the client on the phone. We want to redo our boardroom. Here's the issues behind it. Here's when we expect to be done. Now we're going to have a conversation. Now I can have an ideation process before that conversation, but mainly I want to get the client in and talk about it, whether it's in the space, over the phone, bring them to me for a pitch session where we talk through their project. When that part is done, that's the positioning conversation. When that conversation is done, I may say, I'll have a proposal to you on Monday. Good. Now it's time to have an ideation session. You only think you know what the proposal is going to be. We need to process it. We need to use the techniques that I described in the video or in the webinar to uncover the hidden value in the project, the hidden value for that customer. And that's really the essence of ideation, is how do we uncover hidden value? The output of that is, I have a better understanding of what the objectives of the client are, overarching the objectives for this project, how we're going to measure success, and then what's the value? How is value extracted in this outcome? These things need to show up in my proposal and need to be woven into that, and my options need to reflect increasing value. We're introducing some cleverness, which is why I'm looking for clever salespeople, because I want smarter people in the ideation conversation to spot opportunities so that we can maximize our impact with this particular client. Let's see, did I have more on that? All right, so apparently that's all I was going to say about ideation. So I had a question here that, what's a good close rate? That would have been a great poll question. How many of you actually track your close rate? Well, you know what? I'm not going to do that, but I will tell you, I would say probably 75% of the customers that I ask them what their close rate is as an organization can't tell me. They don't have a number in their heads. It's not something they look at very often. 50%, so there's 25% who know what it is. Another 25% who can find the information fairly easy. Another 25% who say, well, we looked at that once. And then the last 25% say, what's a close rate? So asking a question about a close rate is a how long is a piece of string question. So I don't have a quantifiable answer, which is why there's no content on this slide about what a good close rate is. I have worked with clients who have a 20% close rate, which was phenomenal for the line of business they are in. I've got clients with a 70% close rate, and it kind of sucks. That's not good enough. So it really depends on what it is and what you're doing. If you sell widgets, If you are a transactional salesperson and your interface is a very self-service from the customer standpoint. Well, let's take Amazon. Amazon's the classic self-service user interface. Amazon would track how many people put something into their shopping cart and then don't check out. That's a very important number to Amazon, and it's so important that they track what people look at, and you get one email or you get one thing showing up in your news feed and your algorithm. If you looked at something, you get something completely different if you put it in your shopping cart. So they keep track of that. I expect in those kinds of situations, close rates are really low. You may have 1,000 people look at a product and only one buy it. That's a 0.1% close rate. Which in Amazon world, that could be fantastic, because you could have, a product that, you're going to sell 100,000 of, which means that you needed 10 million people to look at it, but you've got 100 million buyers on Amazon. So that's a great close rate. Most of you are service businesses, your service companies, and your close rate is going to be a reflection of how much effort you put into the sales process. Qualify, position, and close. I'm still working with a client who just over a year ago, their close rate was below 20%. They generated a huge amount of proposals, very detailed, lots of creative, lots of drawings, a lot of work in getting proposals out, and their close rate was horrible. They were really doing a shotgun approach to sales in a service business, and figuring that if you quote to enough people say yes, the business would grow. Unfortunately, what they found was that their business was growing, but their margins were cratering. Their close rate was horrible, and the cost of sales were very, very high. Now, we made some adjustments, and here we are a year later, almost 15 months later. Their close rate hasn't changed that much. But here's the interesting thing. Their qualifying is so much better that they're actually pitching and selling things that make money. So they are winning more business that in the past they would have underpriced, and the client didn't take them seriously because they were underpriced. And they looked at the number and said, you can't do this for that number. Therefore, I don't trust your proposal. So they've actually raised the average amount of a proposal substantially. And so they're winning, same close rate, but they're winning a lot more gross profit. Would I like their close rate to be closer to 50%? You bet I would, because we can still make improvements on their qualifying. We can make improvements on their positioning. They need to quit chasing some lines of business or some verticals that are inherently not very profitable and don't fit their business model as well as they should. However, the close rate does tell us something. I'll give you an opposite example. I had a large client, a large company client whose close rate was like 90%. I mean, it was, it's like, how in the world could you do this? So everything we write, we win. And as we drilled down into it, what we found out was they had negotiated pricing deals with every customer that were delivering low margins. They were the king of value add. They were the king of accommodating client requests, and clients would have been fools to not buy from them. They were just giving away the farm. And that's why their close rate was so high. They were also not seeking any new business. 75%, 80% of their business was repeat business. So the repeat business is great, but the longer they did business with a client, the smaller their margins got, because the client would say, well, I don't know, maybe I should put it out to bid this year. And all of a sudden they'd start slashing prices again. So 90% close rate, margins cratering. So a good close rate for them probably would have been 70%. And what we did was we reset some pricing paradigms. We shifted the way they measured gross profit when they were putting budgets together. We updated some pricing with clients. We changed a few client relationships. We ended up firing one client who it wasn't a yeah, it wasn't 20% of their business or anything like that, but it wasn't an insignificant amount, and freed up some capacity for new business. At the end of the day, we got their close rate down to 70%, which turned out to be about ideal. Their margins shot up pretty darn quickly, and then their revenue started creeping up as well. And they got back into a growth pattern because they've been flat for a while. So what's a good close rate? The answer is it depends. It is the right question. We need to look at the variables. Close rates tell me a lot. I've written an article or I've done some podcasts or something. If you go to my website, or go into the library that you're subscribed to, type in close rates, you'll see it come up fairly often, where I talk more about how to determine a good close rate for you. But call me, be happy to talk with you about it and see what the solution is for your company. All right, we got a question here, and thank you, kind listener. It says, nobody is taking the time to enter data into our new CRM. Right now, it just seems like added work and people leave it for last. If they have time, which they never do, how can we get better buy-in on CRM? Thank you. It's a great question. This is a question obviously coming from a manager because they care about something getting done, as opposed to the users who sometimes don't. CRM, folks, is a management tool. It is a sales tool, and if you use it properly, if you're a clever salesperson, you will find that it's a great tool for helping you in your sales role. However, not all of our salespeople are that clever. Sometimes we're incentivizing them to take the path of least resistance. We've created an environment where they're better off being lazy and going for easy revenue than they are following the process. If you want compliance with CRM, insist on compliance with CRM. I mean, unfortunately, that's the answer. It is not negotiable. You have to have it. We do not process orders without CRM being updated. If you're in a commission-based structure, you've got the perfect leverage. I don't commission jobs that didn't start in CRM. All right. When we're reviewing opportunities, when we're having a sales meeting, and very often sales meetings are the opportunity for the salesperson to get that pat on the back about the big job they've won. We don't talk about anything that's not in the CRM. All right, so we need to appeal to their self-interest. When you want something, appealing to people's self-interest is always a good move. So it is added work, but you also need to show them the benefit of that added work. So if you look at the reports that CRM will provide you, I know in one of these calls, and I believe it was one of the early ones, one of the first 3 calls, I talked about sales pipeline. I gave you the pyramid, or probably the inverted pyramid, the sales funnel thing. If you want to sell, if your goal as a salesperson is your target is $1 million of sales a year, which for you means $500 in new sales. So if you got 500,000 in repeat business, you need 500,000 in new business. If your average transaction is $10,000, that means you need 50 new transactions. Well, in order to get 50 new transactions, you probably need 25 new clients. In order to get 25 new clients, you're probably going to have to talk to 150 to 200 new prospects. In order to get 200 prospects, you have to have about 1,000 leads. This is what we learned from CRM. If you look in somebody's CRM and says, you're only generating 5 leads a week, that's 250 leads, or you're only processing 5 leads a week, there's no way you're going to get to the number of prospects you need in order to make your sales number. So when somebody says, well, don't worry, I'm going to make my sales number, you can say, well, according to the CRM, there's no way you can do that. So use the CRM as the management tool it's designed to be, and you'll find compliance all of a sudden appears, because all of the leads and prospects that they've been hoarding and not bothering to put into the CRM will magically appear because they need to know that they're going to have a job. So there's a long-winded answer. Um, so questions on CRMs, and you guys could put this in chat. Do chat to, if you do chat to everyone, that will work and everybody else will see it. But if you use a CRM, once you put the name of it in there, I know some of you use vTiger, some of you use Insightly, some of you use Insight, which is that the one that's inside of R2, Salesforce. Many of you use no CRM at all. You're simply using Outlook or whatever, and that's fine as well. But share that if you know what you're using. You better know what you're using, right? You're on the sales and marketing call. Thank you for that question, by the way. All right. Ideation. Did I just talk about ideation, or was that the last call? So ideation question. So Tom, I once heard you talk about a different ideation session or process. Can you share those criteria? Okay. So in the webinar the month before last, I went through the ideation process that I'm currently using. It's very team based. It's a really good high level system for getting some information out. But I have taught other systems as well. So I dug this out. I had to go find my notes. I couldn't find anything written about it. But here's an alternate form of ideation. This might be simple for you, and this is a great, if you're just having a one-on-one with a salesperson, if you don't have a team to bring together for ideation, here's a pretty simple process that we can go through. What I'm looking for are known opportunities and known pains. These are things that the client has shared with us. So when we talk about, what's the opportunity? It's the opportunity that the client has shared from us. So we write down, what is the opportunity? The opportunity might be, as an example, we do this job every year, but we need to be able to budget it accurately, and we don't like change. So the opportunity is that they want to find a supplier that they can rely on for a number of years, right? Pains. The client has said, well, one of our pains is that in our previous suppliers is that the costs keep changing, and we don't know where they come from, and we need something that's more predictable. So the pain is they got surprised. They don't like surprises. So these are things that we've learned from the clients. We catalog that. We just write it down in front of us, and so it's right there. The next thing we want to look at is, okay, what unspoken opportunities or unspoken pains? In other words, the client didn't specifically bring this up, but they inferred it, or maybe they hinted at it. Maybe they didn't feel they could tell you, or maybe they didn't know this was an opportunity. For instance, they mentioned something about, oh yeah, well, that thing happens all the time where they don't know which presenter is coming on the stage next. Well, there's an unspoken opportunity. The pain being that the microphone didn't get turned on in time, or we had the wrong graphics up, or whatever it might be. The client may mention these sort of things in passing, but we can make notes about these things because they're unspoken. Here's a problem we could solve that the client's not even aware of that they have, or maybe they don't think that's a solvable problem. Maybe they think that's just normal. I had a client one time, on a high-end corporate show, talking about the feedback, and they meant audio feedback when the CEO was talking last year. And they said, oh yeah, but it only happened a couple of times. I'm thinking, the fact that it happened at all is completely unacceptable on an event of this caliber. We can take that information and treat that as an unspoken pain or an unspoken opportunity that we can capitalize on when we get to the next step. And then there's things that you identify from your point of view. As I look at RFPs, and I look at the venue that the job takes place in, or the time of year, or the location, whatever it might be, there's things that our experience allows us to contribute to a successful outcome that we're going to put into here. So we can identify opportunities, and we can identify pains that we can see from where we're at that the client may not be able to see yet. And this is part of what makes us valuable. And in fact, I will tell you, in my early selling career, particularly the first 10 years or so that I was selling events, I used my point of view identified pains very, very successfully, because I made it a point to understand the venues and know what the challenges for venues, and how difficult it was to get in certain size of trucks into certain places, what things that we needed to do to work with the labor supplier in that space, whatever it might be. So these are things that we can introduce to the conversation. So what do we do with this information? So we've had the conversation with each other, we've ideated, we've written a few things down, now we need to process it. In the service proposal format, there's always 3 options, and the options are formulated from our ideation. And this is the simple way of doing it. In option number 1, I'm going to address the primary opportunities and pains that the client presented us with. In other words, no embellishment, no extra value created in there. I'm simply going to work inside the script that they gave us. And just in case they don't want to see anything else, it's the bare bones solution that solves their problem. That's option number 1. Option number 2 addresses the unspoken opportunities and pains. Now, they may be very apparent to the client and they didn't really call them out or address them. It's a way to add value. It helps them see that you are paying attention, and they go, oh yeah, oh, I didn't know that could be solved. It's like the feedback thing. Really? That's all we had to do to avoid feedback was this? Okay. So that's an option 2, that we're going to increase the value to the customer. There's added cost to address these opportunities and these pains, but it has value to the customer, and it also leads us to option 3. Option 3 is we want to add additional value by injecting our knowledge and our observation of what pains and opportunities exist from our point of view. I call it the imagine a world where there's a greater outcome that the client hasn't considered. I love option 3s because we need to be outside of the realm of expected possibilities in order for it to have impact. And what option 1 does, it makes option 2 look more valuable. What option 2 does is it makes option 3 look more valuable. And what option 3 does is it helps the client decide where they want to place value. This is the classic. This is the Walmart product selection list. I'll date myself. I'll use DVD players here, but 5 years ago, when you could still buy a DVD player and you walked into Walmart, there'd be 3 models. Okay, there'd be the no name, no blame $49. I've never heard of this brand, super cheap, and they got them stacked up to here. There's the $150 model, which has all the features you want, big brand name, and they're like really out of them. Or it's missing that one feature you need, like it has to do Blu-ray, right? That you would expect in a $150 model. And then there's the $300 model that's everything you want and more, and a big brand name. And what Walmart does is, if you want brand and reliability and features, you buy the $300 one. If you're just there to get a cheap one, they make a ton of money on those $49 DVD players. Okay, you are probably there looking for the one in the middle. And if you're looking for the one in the middle, you're probably going to buy the one at the top. So there's the psychology in offering options. Each option makes the other options either look better or worse. That drives you to a better solution. You as a seller, again, we need to be agnostic. We need to be indifferent about which option the client takes. All of the options are valuable to us. We make money on all of them. We always want them, generally we want them to take option 3 because it's the bigger dollar volume. It's more revenue, more accumulated gross profit, but all 3 options are going to be profitable for you. All right. Let's see if we got some more questions here. If not, I'm going to riff in the time that we have left. All right. I'm just going to stop sharing and you can look at my ugly mug for a while. Most of you know I spend a lot of time in marketing. I market my business, requires a lot of marketing. As I was explaining to a client of mine the other night, I market more so I can do less business development because there's only one of me. If I spend a lot of my time doing business development, I don't have enough time to do consulting. The consulting business is delivering consulting can be very, very time consuming, and it's very much on demand the way that I do it. I'm really, at my client's beck and call. And so I want to have as much time as available for that. So in order to do that, I spend more time, more energy on marketing and more money on marketing. One of the things I do is I shoot videos. And this week was a video week. I spent 2 days at my with my marketing strategist. Yes, I have the marketing strategist has a marketing strategist. Think about that for a minute. We sat up there and we shot videos for 2 days, and I shot 50, 60 videos. So I've been in, riffing mode all week long. So let me share some of these because I didn't have any other questions sent in. But let me see if I can share something here that might matter to you. All right, here is a question that I had. Actually, one of you guys may have sent this in sometime in the near past. It says, we seem to be on the end of the food chain. Salespeople just bring in RFPs and we can't get to the value-based conversations you talk about. Where do we start? All right, so this is a perfect question. This is exactly what I was just talking about. If you're getting an RFP, RFPs are not good news. RFPs to me are not a measurement of success. Some sales programs measure, salespeople get a spiff every time they bring in an RFP, or part of their job description is how many RFPs a month they're supposed to bring in, that sort of thing. And to me, RFPs are bad news. RFPs means that all the value has already been squeezed out of the opportunity by the seller. They've packaged it into an RFP. They've pre-commoditized it for you. And it doesn't take any effort at all to get an RFP. It simply means calling people up and say, I'd like an RFP on your next project, and they say yes or no. And you call enough people, you get a stream of RFPs coming in, which, by the way, is how you end up with a 10 or 20% close rate, because you process all these RFPs that you didn't work to get. All you did was pick up the phone and ask for them, or send them an email, or submit a checkbox, or submit your company, information. All right. So I guess I'm going to have some editing to do today. All right. I don't know where I caught off, but I was basically saying that RFPs are not good news. So we're not going to celebrate an RFP. So how do we solve the problem of having value, to getting closer to value-based conversations? So the question was, we seem to be on the end of the food chain. Salespeople ringing RFPs. Where do we start to get value-based conversations? Okay, 3 things, 3 very simple things. One, you need to improve your marketing credibility. So I talked earlier about putting a lot of energy into marketing. That's exactly what you do. You need to work on elevating your credibility so that you are softening the beach at a higher level, so the people that find you actually want to talk to you before they send you an RFP, and then maybe you can preempt this RFP process. The second thing you need to do is elevate your business development and outreach, because while your marketing may soften the beach, business development is the human interface of your marketing to go out there and have a branding conversation with clients. And that's going to help improve your position with the client before there's an RFP. I think the webinar was how to get in front of an RFP. This is what we're talking about. You need to do outreach. You need to do a good marketing message to increase your credibility, and so that when business development reaches out to them, they're more likely to say yes and have a conversation. And third thing you need to do is think in terms of selling the third project. What this means is very often we focus on winning the job that's in front of us. Hey, we worked this hard to get an RFP, and we put all of our energy in it, and this is a winner take all. If we don't win this, we're a failure, right? We don't ever have a chance to win any business from them again, and that's not true. We want to try and address their needs to win this opportunity, but you're always working for the third or fourth job. So even if you win this job, the client needs to see you in their minds being the person they're going to deal with 2 or 3 jobs from now. And if you don't win the job, you want to be in a position for them coming back to you for the next one. In other words, they don't want to. If somebody feels like if they don't give you this business, you don't want to talk to them anymore. If you start giving off the vibes, that you have to do business with me, then they're not going to want to do business with you, and they're not going to give you the next opportunity if they don't give you this one. So think differently about that. All right. Let's find another question we can answer here. Love to see if my Wi-Fi has come back. It looks like it has, so let me shift back here. All right, hopefully everybody's still with me. We're still chugging along. We can look at my ugly mug again, and we'll go to one more question before we wrap it up for this holiday weekend. All right, thank you everybody for hanging out through the technical challenges here. All right, one more question here. What's a good one? Some of these are great. All right, I'm going to talk about taking risks in proposals. It's in option-based selling, when you're selling outcomes and talking about these options, I get a lot of feedback and concern from folks who are not comfortable with working outside the lines. They're not comfortable offering anything that the client didn't specifically ask for. They're afraid that if they do something out of the ordinary, that they're going to be rejected out of hand. And you know what? All of those things are true, right? Get over it. If you do something clever, if you do something thoughtful, if you do something engaging and the customer rejects you for that, thank goodness, go find a better customer. So we need to, so how can we mitigate this risk? So yeah, one, don't worry about the people who don't want risk. Not every customer is going to be right for you. While customers are looking for clever suppliers, hopefully you also want some clever customers. So taking risks in proposal. Now, ideation will help uncover additional value, and that's the whole point of the ideation. We've already talked about the importance of options. What we need to do is connect a story back in here. So if you have the sense that the buyer you're dealing with is going to reject creativity in your proposal, this is a good time to share a story with that client and explaining that why their RFP as it's been presented won't work. And you don't come right out and say, hey, well, we read your RFP and this won't work. We don't want to do this. No, what you want to do is say, let me share a story with you about a job we worked on that had a similar approach to this, and why we think it's important to consider something else. If everything works correctly, what you're asking for will be just fine. However, in our experience, this is what happens, and here's what can happen. So here's a simple story of what can happen. And matter of fact, I could probably share more stories with you than that. So please understand, I'm happy to respond to your RFP. We very much thank you for the opportunity and thank you for answering my questions. But I'm going to send you something that's going to be a little bit different than what you're used to seeing, because I think we have a healthier understanding of what your needs and opportunities actually happen to be. Would that be okay? Would you like to look at a proposal that may take a different approach than some of the other proposals that you're looking at? well presented, who's going to say no to that? All right. So we've eliminated, you may not win the job based on your speech, but you've got permission to send the alternative proposal style. I think I answered this question, maybe it was in the call earlier today. How do we get customers, our longtime customers, to accept a new style of proposal? And this is exactly how we do it. So, all right, well, here we are. Hopefully I've still got a few of you on the call through the technical challenge. I just want to thank you for bearing with me. I want to tell you, I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Those of you who aren't working this weekend, as many people in our industry do, remember what the holiday is for, and takes a moment to remember the veterans who gave their lives for us. That's what Memorial Day is actually about. But then go ahead and enjoy some barbecue or go to the pool or whatever it is else that you do. We've got one more of these calls at the end of this month, and then I'm going to offer something new and different for the coming year for you guys. And do let me know if you're interested in sending some folks to the Jumpstart Workshop for Sales and Marketing. Get your name in the basket earlier so I can give you opportunity at some of the first pass bonuses, and then look for that promotion to start here in the next couple of weeks. So thanks, everybody. Nice visiting with you. We'll talk to you soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.